Hello, everyone. I'm Megan Clubb, and I'm here to talk about my mother, Jean Ferguson, who was one of the founders of L'Ecole, along with my father, Baker Ferguson. So I was asked to talk a little bit about how my mother and my father, but primarily my mother, got involved in wine. And it really all started when they were first married. They were living in Portland, Oregon. And they befriended this amazing wine shop owner. And what they loved to do was to take home wine, serve it for their friends and family members, and just talk about the story. It wasn't about a number or a grade. It was always about the story of the family and their involvement in that particular winery. And my mom had graduated from WSU with a degree in chemistry and home ec, and she was an amazing cook. So what she loved to do, my dad primarily would pick the wines, and then she would do all the food pairing that went along with the wines. And their goal literally was to just put a bottle of wine on the table for their family and friends that they could tell the story about and help educate people and basically, open and explore your palate to see what kind of wines from around the world that people that they loved really would enjoy. Fast forward to the 1970s, and my parents started to have an idea that they wanted to have a winery of their own. At that time, having a winery in Washington State was considered to be kooky. And yet they had done a lot of research, and that included even going out into the local farm fields around here and putting out thermometers to see just how cold the temperatures might get in some of the areas that had better drainage, because that was what they were most concerned about, was whether or not the grapes could survive the winter. They ended up believing that this could be an amazing viticultural area, and they started by my mom, who, as I told you, was a chemistry and home ec graduate of WSU, going to Seattle and taking classes in enology in Seattle. And then as they got more and more serious, she began to come where we lived down in San Francisco. We were in the East Bay, and she would take classes, extension classes at UC Davis in enology. Their first harvest was 1983, and they produced Merlot and Semillon. As a little side note, my mother's favorite wine was Vouvray. And so because she was the winemaker, she was able to have a lot of leverage, I'd say, on my dad, and insisted that shortly after they started the winery that they would make Chenin. And so they still, today at L'Ecole, we still make a Chenin Blanc, and I consider it completely in my mom's honor. But anyway, their 1983 harvest ended up being very successful. In fact, the 1983 Merlot took the only gold medal at the Enology Society's, Pacific Northwest Enology Society's annual event and contest. And she was particularly excited. She actually didn't know that they were winning the award, but somebody came up to my dad, Marty and I happened to be there, and let him know that he should pay a lot of attention. Because she was going to be honored, and the 1983 Merlot won this big award, and the judges were Warren Winiarski from Stag's Leap and Angelo Gaia from the world-known Italian winery. And she was just flabbergasted. She was beside herself. It was a really cool thing to see her succeed in that way. Anyway, they continued to have great success with their wines. We basically got involved in the winery primarily as carrying on the family legacy, but also as an avenue to have a opportunity to have a much better balance between work and family, which we were not finding in California. Thinking about how far the industry has come and you know, what her reaction would be today. When they started, there wasn't a wine tourism or, you know, tasting room kind of activity going on. So they went completely by faith that this was going to work out. And honestly, the only thing that they wanted was to be able to put a bottle of wine on their table, serving great food along with it, and say, this is all world class. That was their goal. And so unfortunately, my mom passed away in 1998. At the time, it was clear that Washington State was indeed making fine wine. And it was also becoming known that Walla Walla would be a wonderful place in the state to have wine and grow grapes and make wine. My dad died in 2005, and he really recognized and was so grateful for what Marty had accomplished there. And then it's, you know, my kids are like, well, we got to keep this going. So they're involved on the board. Rebecca has a degree from WSU in wine business management. Riley has his degree from MIT in business. And so they're both really good contributors. And his wife worked at L'Ecole. And their son, who's 15, is working at L'Ecole. This whole sense of multi-generational legacies, and they're hoping to accomplish the same thing with the winery. I am super proud of her. She was an at-home mom. And so this was her first real job where, you know, she was the first time where she really, I think, felt that she was working for a purpose. And when she won that award for the 1983 Merlot, she had a sense of pride, was endless. Just, it struck her as being, she now achieved something as a professional, what she also considered a very important career as a mom and a homemaker. But that was her first real professional accolade. And it meant a lot to her. She was a real believer in education. And I think that she would for sure be suggesting to women that you can do what you set your heart out to do. Like, you know, don't limit yourself. She would really encourage people, if they were interested in this industry, to get some education. And that also opens doors and makes some connections where, you know, networking is important in your first job that you might be pursuing in this particular industry. So that's, I would assume, what she would say to people. When I am approaching mentoring, basically it's making sure that women feel supported, making sure that women are given opportunities, encouraging them to take steps forward. The other thing that I'm a big proponent of is trying to come up with ways to have a work and family life balance. And I encourage women to not try to do everything. Get some help around the home. I would just like to say that I'm so honored that she's selected. And I, you know, I know that I still feel a very strong connection to her. She's pretty proud and happy. So thank you. The greatest achievement that she and they together ended up doing was the 1983 Merlot, and having it win this gold medal and having it recognized by people like Warren Winiarski, Angelo Gaia. They actually visited Italy in 1987, and Angelo invited them to come to his winery. And, you know, he made a big deal about how great the wines were. And so I would say that the biggest thing that she probably feels that was accomplished was the proving out of the fact that amazing wines, wonderful wines, world-class wines could be made here.